The Paul Leslie Interviews.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is our pleasure to introduce a radio DJ legend. In the Atlanta market, he was the longest-running morning radio personality. Rhubarb Jones has been recognized countless times by various organizations and associations. In 1983, the Academy of Country Music awarded him Radio Personality of the Year. In 1991, he was inducted into the Atlanta Country Music Hall of Fame. In 1993, he was nominated for an Emmy. In 1999, he was voted one of Atlanta's Disc Jockeys of the Century from the Atlanta Society of Entertainers. Radio and Records magazine named him one of country music radio's 100 most influential personalities. In 2001, he was inducted into the Country Music Disc Jockey Hall of Fame in Nashville. In 2007, he was inducted into the Georgia Radio Hall of Fame. It's a great pleasure.
Well, I'm honored. I was sitting there listening to that introduction. My goodness. Kind of, wow. You know, you don't think about things when you're doing them. You know, when things, incidents in your life, and they just come along and you say, well, that's pretty good, but what can I do today to be a little better? So, yeah, going into the Georgia Radio Hall of Fame in 2007 and the Country Music Disc Jockey Hall of Fame, and winning a couple of awards from the CMA and the Academy of Country Music, it's been very gratifying. You know, and I've keep my toe in radio a little bit, but I do it just for fun. We're not doing it for a living now, you know.
Well, I think most stories are best from the beginning. So what was life like growing up?
I grew up, my parents divorced when I was about 4, and me and my mother moved to her hometown of Tallapoosa, Georgia, when I was a little boy, and grew up in a household. We didn't have a lot of money. We never did without food or anything like that, but, you know, we didn't waste anything. I'll just say that. You used a bar of soap, you used it till it was gone, and you didn't waste. I mean, that's just it. You didn't waste food, and just, you know, I don't know. I had a grandmother who taught me how to cook, and she, you know, practically raised me because my mother was having to work all the time. But it was a good place to grow up, Tallapoosa. I moved back there. I bought a house there in 2006 and moved back and live on the street that I grew up on.
Wow.
And it was Stone Street when I was for 130 years, and about 20-something years ago, they renamed it Rhubarb Lane. So I live on Rhubarb Lane. I live at 70 Rhubarb Lane, and it's great falling asleep at night and hearing those trains and, you know, all those things that I grew up with, and had great neighbors and great friends. And it's a town where everybody gets along. And I'm very proud of that. I mean, we elected a Superior Court judge who was born in Thailand. Our county commission chairman for many years was an African-American kid who was just a few years behind me in school. And race doesn't seem to be an issue. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of where I'm from and where I live. And in many, many ways, it's far more progressive than counties and cities much larger. I don't know. I love growing up in Tallapoosa, and went to Southern Union State Junior College down in Wadley, Alabama for a couple of years. Got to be the second year there, was editor of the paper and president of student body. And I went from there to Jacksonville State University and kind of found myself academically over my head. My mother says, all right, good. You get to come home and stay here with us and hopefully West Georgia will let you in, and they did, and I found my niche when I was at West Georgia. I was very fond of going to school at West Georgia, and it was great, and graduated in 74, and moved to Columbus, Georgia, and worked at a rock station there, and moved to Asheville, North Carolina about a year and a half later, and got my first job in country music. And you know, you were telling me, Paul, that we met at a Gene Watson concert. Gene Watson was a brand new artist. He had only been out about a year when I met him. He had a song that crossed over. Some rock stations played Love in a Hot Afternoon. But I met him, and it was the beginning of a long, long, long friendship. almost 40 years. So from Asheville, went to Montgomery and spent 7 years there, and great things happened there. And then moved to Atlanta in 1985 and spent 23 years on the air at 106.7. And I could see the writing on the wall about 2003, 2004 that radio was changing. It was becoming corporate and it was becoming less personal, being far more impersonal. It was more about profit than people. So I always had a plan B, always keep a plan B, and that was I went to graduate school so I could teach. So I went to Shorter University and got a master's degree and graduated with 4.0 and Sigma Beta Delta Honor Society and blah, blah, blah. Things that I didn't do when I was in my 20s because I wasn't focused in those days. But I've been at Kennesaw State over 6 years. 5 of those years were in the classroom, and I learned a lot, and I'm still close to a lot of my students. And maybe I'll go back in the classroom one day, but right now we're just working in the Office of Development trying to raise funds because it takes a lot of money to raise a university, and we can't depend on the taxpayer. That's just the reality of things. So we just try to do the best we can here. It's a great university. Kennesaw State is doing a merger with Southern Poly, and we'll be the second largest university in the state of Georgia come January 1st, 2015. So it's pretty exciting.
Were you always a music fan?
Always. Just remember hearing my mother singing Blue Suede Shoes, the Carl Perkins Blue Suede Shoes song. I remember I was 3-4 years old when that came out. Getting to tell Carl Perkins that one time sitting in the back seat of his car, he was playing a tape of some new songs he recorded with another buddy of mine who grew up with Carl in Jackson, Tennessee, but who was the executive director of the Academy of Country Music. Bill Boyd, rest his soul, he introduced me to Carl, and that was great. And I told him, I said, I remember hearing my mom singing Blue Suede Shoes when I was a little kid. It was a pretty big success for him, and Elvis cut it too, so. But always hearing things like Jim Reeves and Eddie Arnold, and Mom listening to Johnny Mathis and the Mills Brothers, Brenda Lee. Brenda Lee was my very first crush. I was in the 4th grade, and getting to know Brenda, later on, she always had a big laugh about that. Everybody thinks Brenda Lee's 90 years old, but no, she's only 70, I think. And she's just a terrific human being. But I heard a lot of music growing up. Like every other kid, when I got in about the 6th grade, was it? The Beatles came out. And I remember watching Ed Sullivan that February night in 1964, and I said, this is our music. This is my generation's music. So, got caught up in all those bands, the Stones and the Beatles, and, later on some of the American bands like the Beach Boys and like Paul Revere and the Raiders, and then I discovered R&B music. Otis Redding, Aretha Franklin, Sam and Dave, Wilson Pickett. Remember hearing the Drifters and Coasters on the radio. I don't know. I have always loved music, and I can't imagine. I don't think I've ever gone 12 hours without listening to it. Just can't be done.
You said that radio is becoming impersonal.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the model that they're using today is a sustainable one?
Well, time's going to tell, because one thing that I learned in teaching is students 18 to 25, they don't use the radio like their parents did, or my generation did. There are too many alternatives. You have Pandora. I could go on and on and on about the alternatives to radio. I mean, iTunes radio. You pick an artist, and there you are. They play whatever you want to hear. But I still, one thing that I love about radio is a very human medium. It's you touch people. I mean, I've talked people out of suicides. I've talked people out of being members of a hate organization. I've been able to help raise money for sick kids, and I've helped raise money for for families who were facing hardship during the holidays. I mean, I'm proud of those things, and I didn't do it by myself. All I did was ask people to help me, and they heeded the call. So I was very lucky. But radio today, they don't do that. They just don't do it, and it's highly impersonal. And they're reading off cue cards, and I don't listen much to Atlanta radio except for maybe talk radio. But I guess because I'm older now, and I guess that's the law. You got to do that. But I do listen to my hometown radio station out in Tallapoosa, WKNG, which is traditional country, playing music 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, that I really enjoy a lot. And they play stuff that Atlanta radio won't play, like Johnny Cash. Good grief. I bet you I was the last guy to play a Johnny Cash record in Atlanta radio. I'll bet you I was the last person to play an Oak Ridge Boys song, or Ronnie Millsap, or Loretta Lynn. I could go on and on and on. It's just now it's run by consultants, corporations that have no clue. They said, well, it works in Detroit, so let's try it in Atlanta. I don't know. It's kind of you're killing the goose that laid that golden egg. And to see whether large market radio is going to survive is going to be interesting. I hope it does, but there are too many alternatives for people to get entertainment. I think that the smartphones, the iPhone is just incredible. Everything that I have to keep up with emails and text messages and music, to unlock my phone, I use my fingerprint. It's just, there are just too many other alternatives I put my music library on my phone, and then I can get iTunes radio and I can listen to whatever. I just hope that I wish radio would wake up and get local again. But that's just the way it is. And I voice track a rock oldie station down in Montgomery, Alabama on Saturday afternoons. Do a 5-hour show that I voice track from my house. But I try to make it as live sounding as possible by employing my kids to do stuff with me or just try to be entertaining and try to keep it local. I talk about Montgomery and the river region down there. And, I was there, 30 years ago, and those people treat me like I hadn't left. I'm not even playing the same kind of music I was before, but people were very, very loyal to me then, and it's looking pretty good they're loyal to me now.
Can you give us your memories of how you felt the first time your voice was heard on the radio?
I was excited. I was scared. My first radio job, I was a student at Jacksonville State University in North Alabama, and I went and applied at all the radio stations in Anniston. I had no experience at all, and they said, come back, get some experience, and come back. So I went to Piedmont. It's the last-ditch effort. It's the last thing, and the guy just happened to be from Tallapoosa, Georgia, graduated high school there in 1955. And he said, can you start Sunday? So I did Sundays, and I just never will forget. We signed on the radio station at 7 a.m. I got there at 5:30. We signed off the station like at 6 at night. And I was just so excited. And I remember just being nervous and excited. And then when the first time you opened that mic and I knew I was hooked. That was it. That was that. That was then. It was exciting, and it's still exciting to do it. I'm not nervous now. The nerves have gone away. It became just very natural to me. I really got into radio, number one, because I love music. I said, you mean they will pay me money to play records? Well, I was going to play records anyway, so might as well make $1.50 an hour. It was always exciting. And radio is radio. It doesn't matter where you are. You're always, remember, you're reaching people.
No doubt you've seen a lot of concerts. Who has been the greatest raw talent you ever saw?
Unpolished. I saw Alabama before they were really polished. I played drums on the demo that they sent to Warner Brothers for this kid from Marietta. They needed the drummer that they had for the session got sick, and the producer called me and said, you drum? And I said, yeah. He said, will you come and play on 4 tracks for this kid that we've got from Marietta? We think Warner Brothers may sign him. And I came down and I played on these tracks, and the kid came in, and he had this smile and he had this charisma about him. And a year and a half later, he had a record deal with Warner Brothers. That's Travis Tritt. There are just some people that first time you hear them, you're blown away. First time I heard Treasure Yearwood, blown away. First time I heard Patti Loveless, knocked out. Growing up, listening to gospel music in my home as a child on Sunday morning, becoming friends and knowing the Oak Ridge Boys for the better part of 40 years. I mean, that's pretty gratifying. Always loved that. And when they made the transition from Southern gospel music to country, I thought it was great. But as far as raw talent, Gene Watson is one of those guys that had raw talent. Here is working in a body shop outside of Houston, and he goes into the studio in Houston with Russ Reeder, and they cut Love in a Hot Afternoon. And I never will forget Jim Fife, who was the voice of the Auburn Tigers for years. I was a music director at WLWI in Montgomery, and I called him and said, Jim, I want you to hear this record. And he came in, and I played Farewell Party for him, and he cried. And a year or so later, I played He Stopped Loving Her Today for him, and he cried. And that's the great thing about country music, how it evokes an emotion or a feeling that I think that most of today's country music just fails miserably at. It seems to be all about guys with their ball caps on backwards, sitting on the back of a truck on a dirt road next to the lake with Sally Mae, and they're going to drink beer till the crack of dawn. I mean, it just seems to be kind of misguided. Country music is far more than what's being portrayed today. Some of these acts I don't understand. I don't understand how they're successful. Now, some of them, like George Strait, 30-something years at it. He'll be 63 his next birthday. George Strait. I voted for him for Entertainer of the Year. Why? Because he drew the biggest crowds in his farewell tour of anybody in the history of country music. Kenny Chesney still got it. Tim McGraw still got it. I think Miranda Lambert is fantastic. Blake Shelton is great. But for the most part, a lot of what I'm hearing on country radio, I don't get. Love Eric Church. I think he's great. Brantley Gilbert. I get him. Some of the acts I really don't understand, like Florida Georgia Line. I don't. I'm sure they're fine fellas, but I just don't get their music.
On your website, rhubarbjones.com, there's pictures of just all kinds of people. You mentioned a lot of people that are some of the more modern country singers, and then some of them who've been in the game for a long time.
Right.
Who have you been the most thrilled to meet?
Johnny Cash.
Johnny Cash.
No question. When I first met him back around 1980, I knew I was around greatness. I just knew it. I keep a picture of me and him on next to my desk that just kind of reminds me. To me, I'm thrilled with greatness. I love greatness in whatever. If you make the best coffee in the world, I'm thrilled with that. I love greatness. If you make the best hamburger or Cuban sandwich or French fries or barbecue, I love greatness. I love above average. I don't like average. I love above average. Cash did that. George Jones was perhaps the most unpretentious human being I ever met in my life. He really didn't realize how great he was. There were some great performers that never really got their due. People I think deserve to be in the Country Music Hall of Fame. Gene Watson's one. Vern Gosdin is another. I've always loved people that sang from their heart. And you've got formula artists out there that this hit sounds like the one they just did. And the next hit is going to sound like this one if it's successful. So it seems to be a lot of formula, and I try to keep up with other genres of music. My 12-year-old, she took me to some concert back in the summer down at Lakewood to see 3 of these, I don't know what they call them, pop, punk, whatever. Just try to see what's going on. I'll tell you some greatness. and shows that music stands the test of time. Great music does. Garth Brooks. He's been off the scene for what? 15, 16, 17, 18 years? He came back and he sold out every venue multiple times that he played. Atlanta, 5, 6 times. Chicago, 8 times. Every house he played, they sold it out multiple times. So Garth is an example of greatness. Paul McCartney, he's 72. He's still great. Bob Seger, he'll be 70 his next birthday. He just released an album. It's good. Not just in country music. There's a lot of pop players. Like, I'm excited that Kenny Loggins is coming to Bremen on Monday, and he was one of the guys when I was in pop radio. He did one of my favorite albums. He released an album called Celebrate Me Home, which is just nice music. Because when I first got into radio, 72, your mama don't dance and your daddy don't rock and roll. That was a big, big top 40 hit. And so I'm excited. And I interviewed him on the radio back in the 70s, and he was so nice. I'm excited about Kenny Loggins because he's, 70-ish and still going. Great music doesn't have a shelf life. I can hear an act on the air of a new country artist, and I'll say, I bet they're not going to be playing this guy in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. So it's different. I mean, you think Clint Black, he's still got a shelf life, still going strong. Kenny Rogers is in his 70s. He's still putting fannies in the seats and selling records. So I just think that the great ones will stand. Loretta Lynn is 80? She's still going.
There's a picture that I saw of you, the great songwriter Bruce Birch, and Wayne
Great
Newton.
man, great friend, great story behind that.
I'd love to hear it.
There were a friend of mine that I got to know through radio would come out to my remotes sometimes, and she was what they called one of the Wayniacs, which is Wayne Newton's fan club. Now Wayne is a show business icon. He is of that Vegas thing that Sinatra and Dean Martin and Sammy and the whole Rat Pack thing, and he was he was on he knew Lucille Ball and Jack Benny and Jackie Gleason. He always referred to those people Mr. Sinatra, Mr. Gleason, Mr. Benny, Miss Ball. I always loved that about him. But anyway, she approached me and said, Wayne wants to do a country album. Can he call you? And I said, yeah, sure, right. Well, by golly, he called. And we talked, and I said, well, Wayne, I said, this ain't my pig and this ain't my farm. My advice is free, but you can't cut an album in L.A. or New York or Las Vegas. You're going to have to come to Nashville, and you need to go find some fresh music. And he said, will you help me find some songs, some writers, and a producer? So I said, well, sure. And I got to be friends with Rick Goodman, who was the drummer and the producer of the Happy Goodman Family Records. And I got to thinking, what if you could bring that energy to this icon? And I put them all together, and, I didn't think anything about it. And Bruce had several cuts, I think, on that album that Wayne did, which I thought was great, but radio wouldn't play it because it was Wayne Newton, unfortunately. But still, Wayne never forgot that. Wayne always, it's his show business roots. He never forgets a favor, and he became a good friend because of that. This is a true story. This is how powerful this guy was. I went on vacation to Hawaii. I didn't tell anybody where I was going except some family. We were in the island of Kauai, and then we were going to fly over to Maui, stay a few days. And anyway, we left. We flew to Maui, and I get a phone call at the hotel. This, people walk around. Cell phones were in bags back in those days. And it was Wayne's personal assistant. And he found me. And he said, Wayne wants to airship you the tapes for you to listen to. So the next day, I had the tapes, and I just listened to it. And I thought what I heard was good. The whole thing through that. Oh, you need this room? All righty, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
No. We're
Professor Jones, you probably don't remember me. I was in some of your classes.
What's your name?
My name is Rob Renz. So
Mr. Renz, I remember you.
We work for 680 The Fan.
Yeah, wait, I'm
now.
man, love it. All right, is Gurley in or out? What say
He's
you?
in. He's coming back from Florida.
Good, all right.
Coming back from Florida.
How are you?
I'm
Nice to see you.
you.
How are you? Good to see you. It's
Not
good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Good to meet
Guys,
you.
y'all take care.
All right, have a good
All
one.
righty. Let's go find
You know what, Rhubarb? That office next to Melissa's might be.
Let's try that.
Right here.
Yeah. Where were we?
We were talking about his waneness.
Wayne was just, and he flew from Las Vegas to Atlanta for my 40th birthday. Things like that you don't forget. And every show that I've seen perform, we sit ringside, and he always just recognizes me. And oh my gosh, it's that I think about just how dang lucky I've been. I've just been very, very lucky being at the right place at the right time.
Well, what are you most proud of?
Raising money for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. The March Across Georgia thing that we did every June for the better part of 20 years with a golf tournament. We're proud of that. And it was something we did because we saw what leukemia did to children. And it's not pretty. I got involved with that through a man named Danny Thomas, who was another entertainment icon from St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And we decided we not only want to help kids, but leukemia affects 10 times more adults than children. So I think of that, the charity work that we did over the years, the Toys for Tots things. Those are the proudest things.
What is the best thing about being Rhubarb Jones?
People being nice to me, and you just saw an example of that in the hall of people that, here's a woman that works for the university that I've seen her, but I didn't know she listened to me growing up. I think that's a great thing, the fact that people remember, or they can hear me asking a question in a Kroger store or a grocery store or a Walmart, and I know that voice. That's pretty gratifying.
What is your all-time favorite meal?
Fried chicken.
Fried chicken.
Fried chicken, that's it.
With what?
Fried chicken and mashed potatoes. Yeah, that's the all time. I remember my grandmother, we had fried chicken that was special. Fried chicken was something we might have on Sunday. But I've always loved fried chicken. Never been tired of fried chicken. I don't know.
For anyone who listens to this, wherever they are, what would you say to them? Completely open-ended.
I think whatever your dreams or your ambitions are, never give up on it, and never allow anybody to tell you you can't do it. Take ownership of your life and say, oh, yes, I can. And I think that's the most important thing is if you're an aspiring musician, if you work hard enough, but you've got to be able to take rejection when it happens, but never give up. Never, ever, ever give up. One of my favorite personalities this planet ever had was Sir Winston Churchill, whose philosophy was never, never, never give up. And he led England in World War II, and Adolf Hitler dropping bombs. He told the English people, don't give up. We will get through this. And sure enough, they did. And Winston Churchill, was he perfect? No, he had problems. He was a functioning alcoholic. But at the end of the day, he believed. And he got it done.
You're no doubt a man that knows his music. If you could pick one song, it doesn't have to have words. It could be a classical song. It could be a pop song. It could be a country song, a rock song, classic, whatever. What is the song that best describes you? Your theme song.
Wow. Thank God I'm a country boy. Yeah, it's hard to say. My favorite piece of music is George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, because he wrote it looking at Bowcatcher Mountain. He was on top of Bowcatcher Mountain, and he looked down on the city of Asheville and the lights. And he wrote this great piece of, I guess you'd call it modern classical music. I always loved that. Isaac Hayes recorded a song, He Keeps His Eye on the Sparrow, that they sang at one of my dearest friends. He had a funeral the other day that I conducted. I like songs that got personal meaning. I still embrace music that I kind of grew up with. On the pop side, I just downloaded a new Herb Alpert album called In the Mood. It's got some old songs on there, but he's still playing his trumpet like he did in the 1960s. He's 79 years old. He's part of that greatness that stood the test of time. But music, I think music is a balm. It's something that's good for the soul. It's good for the spirit. I've never met a person that said they didn't like some form of music. You gotta love some kind of music. Fortunately, I'm still spinning records on a Saturday, and it's music. A lot of the music that I kind of grew up listening to. I was kind of a late bloomer in country music. I don't know. Bob Dylan did an album called Nashville Skyline. I remember buying that. Johnny Cash having him on his show, and I remember buying Johnny Cash's Live at Folsom Prison, which is one of those albums that if you had a top 10 album that you had to have, if you were going to be on a desert island, that'd be one of them.
My last question, who is Rhubarb Jones?
He's just a small town boy who just had a good life, and he had a good raising, and he got to laugh a lot, got to love a lot, got to see some great things, and witnessed things that are. I saw pieces of history that I'll never forget. I remember seeing when President Kennedy was elected. I remember seeing when President Kennedy was assassinated. I remember watching live on TV when Lee Harvey Oswald was killed in the basement of the Dallas police station. I remember vividly watching the 6 o'clock news and what was going on in Vietnam, and seeing 9/11, being on the air when 9/11 happened. I got to witness a lot of huge things. I mean, when I measure greatness, I think of people that, like Elvis. I think Elvis was great, not only musically, but also as a philanthropist. He gave away millions and millions of dollars for various causes. I named my oldest daughter, who is 12, Presley, after him, because I said, here is what you can take a Southern boy from very humble roots and become a worldwide icon. My youngest daughter, who just turned 10 the other day, Callie Reeves, I named her after Dan Reeves, who he coached the Falcons, the only coach ever to get the Falcons to the Super Bowl. He coached the New York Giants. He coached the Denver Broncos. He played football for the Dallas Cowboys. He's the man that if you knocked him down when he was a player, he got back up. He could do whatever was needed, and he never asked why, what do we need to do to win or whatever. He just did what was required, and that's what I try to instill in my kids. They never give up, and they always give it their best shot.
Mr. Jones, it's been a great pleasure.
Well, Paul Leslie, it's an honor to have been with you, and I hope you stay in touch.
Thank you.